Just going to do this quick live stream to give some updates on the expedition. So I'm going to share my screen here in just a bit and to provide those details.
Hello, meatbags. Meaty Matty wants everyone to know the expedition is going ahead as planned, despite the loop he's caught himself in.
1 second.
Yep, and as expected, his proposed scientific reason is both ridiculous and impossible. I have to say, this guy is a wonderful example of what not to do when it comes to visiting a protected area.
Okay, so I'm just going to read these emails and then go over some stuff regarding disinformation that's being put out by this network that's stalking and harassing me. It's trying to undermine the goals of the expedition and things of this nature. So I'm just going to read this.
You know, he clearly doesn't understand what stalking actually is either. He's a lot like Timbo in that regard, so let's try to explain. Stalking, Matthew, involves private harassment. Out here, we're in the public, and believe it or not, when you post a video or rant to your channels, you're doing it publicly. You have no right to expect privacy in public, period. Which means you've basically turned your life into a public spectacle. You can't guilt us into looking away, but you can escape public scrutiny by going private.
You know, these email exchanges between myself and the U.S. Department of State to refute their disinformation. So first I'll just get started here. Reading here. Dear Mr. Weider, thanks for completing the DS4131 form with the information you have so far. However, in order for us to move forward with the U.S. government advance notification process, you will need to have reached tentative agreement with an operator or operators to provide vessel and helicopter support for your planned expedition and with tentative dates for the expedition.
They want you to get an operator, but an operator won't take you into an ASPA without a permit. Thus, you can't get an operator until you have a permit. Moreover, this is the State Department and not the NSF. The State Department is not a scientific organization, and they certainly aren't going to stand up for you if you can't provide a valid scientific reason for being there. They're likely to simply say you can't go.
I can't wait for you folks to hear his supposedly scientific reason for this nonsense.
The information in the DS4131 form should then reflect that agreement. Please also note that entry permits into ASPA 172 Blood Falls and Lower Taylor Glacier, as well as other ASPAs in the McMurdo Dry Valleys, are only granted for scientific studies to achieve objectives that can only be conducted within that ASPA. A bit more background: different governments have different policies on whether they authorize expeditions or provide advance notification. And with activities in Antarctica require permits for that government. Perhaps as a result, not all tour operators offer helicopter services in Antarctica. To save time, you may wish to contact the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators to inquire which operators might be able and willing to provide vessel and helicopter support for a private expedition to the McMurdo Dry Valleys, and then reach out to those operators. Best regards. You can see, Gene Preston at the U.S. Department of State. So, I responded to that email, right? And this is just to give updates on the expedition itself and to refute the disinformation spins that are coming out from the network on part of their spokes people like Robato's son, Stephen Adams, and whoever else, whichever agents in their network are attempting to discredit this expedition and my message. I'm showing this as proof to refute those claims that this expedition is not happening or impossible, or the permits are impossible, right? So I'll continue on with these emails. So I responded, right? Dear Miss Preston, thank you for your feedback on the completed DS4131 form and for the additional background on the advanced notification process. I appreciate the clarification on the need for tentative agreements with operators and the requirements for ASPA entry permits. I have revised the form to reflect a more science-based focus for the expedition. The primary objective is to conduct non-invasive observations of the unique microbial ecosystems and iron oxide discharges at Blood Falls, ASPA 172, studying how life persists in extreme environments.
Matthew, how exactly do you plan to study microbes non-invasively? Microbes are tiny. To see them, you need to take a sample to put under a microscope. And that taking a sample is highly invasive. You, and I say this not to mock, but as a statement of fact, clearly do not understand how actual field science works. The NSF will privately laugh at you for thinking anything new can be learned from field notes and photos. They have plenty of both, plus actual lab work too. Maybe if you were a teacher, you could have worked an angle like the one you seem to dislike so much, educating kiddos. But that's a big maybe, Matthew, a very big maybe.
This could provide insights into extremophile resilience under harsh conditions, symbolically mirroring survival in brutal environments. These observations can only be achieved on site in this unique location, using methods such as field notes, photography, and environmental data logging. Okay, so I go on here, right? Okay, so then Miss Preston replied, Dear Mr. Weider, thank you for your reply and for the updated DS4131 form. I see that you are now proposing to spend 10 days in ASPA 172 so we can understand your current concept for the expedition. Are you planning on having a helicopter take your group back to the vessel each evening after a day of scientific observations, or are you planning to overnight on the continent? We at the State Department will not be able to formally start processing the DS4131. That is, referring it to EPA and NSF so they can begin their review of the initial environmental evaluation and any needed permit application until you have agreement in principle from an operator or operators that they will provide the needed vessel and helicopter support for the expedition, including the operator's contact information, the precise planned dates when the vessel would depart and return to Christchurch for your group's expedition, and the dates the helicopter would take your group to and from the vessel to the McMurdo Dry Valleys.
He obviously stopped reading somewhere before she linked both the EPA and NSF, because at the end of the sentence it mentions required permits. By the way, Matthew, I haven't gotten into the EPA yet because there really is no point until you can convince the NSF you need to go there. And again, the NSF doesn't need your photos, untrained field notes, and probably poorly taken environmental readings. The way you held that RF detector shows you're not exactly knowledgeable about the use of tools. You're never going to convince them they need a boob like you in a place like that to possibly risk you accidentally killing a unique biome with your ignorance.
We will verify with operators or an operator that they plan to provide the support described in DS4131. Okay, so in the DS4131 form, rather. So, okay, so here's the rest of the email if you wish to pause and read through this.
It's important to note that these emails occurred over a month ago, which would indicate Matthew has made no actual progress since then. It would seem he's too busy with updating the ledger to actually read the rest of her email. From here, it pretty much turns into a bitch fest about myself and others who are trying to explain he's chasing a delusion. Feel free to check it out on his channel if you're interested. I found it quite entertaining.